Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today I shall be doing a long overdue Blu-ray and DVD update, this time for September 2021. So let's of course begin with the Blu-rays. First up we have John Wick Chapter 2, starring Keanu Reeves, a film that I have actually had in the collection for a little while, and something that I've just been meaning to get around to watching. And I did really enjoy the first film, which I will link the update video this featured in somewhere on screen so you can hear my thoughts in full on this movie from when I watched it back then. And I found this film overall to be very enjoyable for an action thriller, a revenge movie. Very evocative beginning with the sequence involving John Wick's wife and the little puppy. And I was hoping the character of Wick would be heavily expanded upon in the sequel, with him being stripped of that sort of essence of life from what we've seen previously and now rebuilding himself with such a hefty loss to his life. I thought that we would see a new side to his character, but sadly in the sequel, although it's very much bigged up to be better than the first film, and to my surprise has a higher rating than the first movie on websites such as IMDb, I was fairly disappointed with this film. It's not to necessarily say it's a bad movie. It was a great action flick, so many phenomenal and very well executed stunts, very interesting sequences involving car chases particularly, especially at the beginning of the film, and the very satisfying conclusion where Wick once again gets revenge on those who have wronged him, particularly towards the end in the Hall of Mirrors scene. I very much enjoyed those kinds of sequences, but the middle sort of body of the film I found to be very monotonous and quite repetitive for not really enhancing the character in any way. My favourite bits of the film, surprisingly, were some of the side characters. I really loved what Lawrence Fishburne brought to this film with his very minimal role, and I hope that does get expanded upon in the other movies going forward. And I also surprisingly quite liked Ruby Rose's character, an actress I'm not overly fond of, but in this film, she was essentially a silent assassin that communicated through sign language. I thought that was quite a nifty sort of quirk to her character, but beyond that, just didn't really take to this movie. I don't know whether or not I'll check out the third film. You can let me know in the comments if John Wick Chapter 3 is worth my time, perhaps. But yeah, not something I would personally recommend, but I know for a fact there will be folks out there that will very much enjoy this kind of movie for what it is. So that is John Wick Chapter 2. Next up we have a couple of Kubrick films I've wanted to add to my Blu-ray collection for a little while. The first of which being Paths of Glory, which I did initially have on DVD, but I wanted to upgrade it to the Blu-ray version, so I went for the Masters of Cinema release. And overall this was a very enjoyable transfer of the film. It was great to rewatch this movie since I hadn't seen it now in a couple of years. And it was overall great to reflect on this film. It's a very short movie at that, and it takes place during the First World War with Colonel Dax, portrayed fantastically by Kirk Douglas, left in a very difficult predicament where several of his men are actually put to death for cowardice, and so throughout the majority of the film it's spent with him trying to defend the honour of those that are obviously now going to die so suddenly, and it's quite a dark ending that, to be honest, I've always found to be kind of ruined by this scene that I've always felt was kind of tacked on to the end. And the only reason I highlight that is because I came across a comment not too long ago, which to be honest I don't even think I responded to, so I'll do one better and screenshot it for this video. But it highlighted a great interpretation of the end scene, where several soldiers are drinking in a bar, and then all of a sudden this foreign lady just breaks out into song, which I always felt kind of ruined the mood after such a dark ending. But the way that was interpreted, with the lady being disrespected, and then as soon as she breaks out into song, it unifies the soldiers that were once animals, and then after she stops, they're just straight back plunging into war once again. I thought that was a really great point and something that I didn't really consider when watching the film initially, so certainly it broadened my mind on the ending. And if you want to check out that video, it was my Stanley Kubrick collection overview where you can hear my initial thoughts on Paths of Glory if you are interested. We also have Kubrick's third ever feature film, The Killing, which to be honest I hadn't really heard anything about. It was a complete blind buy for me, and for what it's worth I genuinely quite liked it. It was quite a fun thrill ride, the soundtrack was very enjoyable, and I loved for each individual character how different they really were, with 7 individuals plotting a shared heist or robbery of a horse racetrack. And as far as each character playing their part goes, some parts went a lot smoother than others. I particularly quite liked the snappy assassin character, who was set to shoot at a horse during the 7th race in order to cause a distraction. And that character I thought was quite brutal in some instances, but had a sort of witty charm to him as well. Very mixed feelings on that character, but certainly one of the standout moments throughout. And the main sort of robbery sequence towards the end with the clown mask I thought was quite clever and made for overall quite an entertaining film. One thing I was surprised about with this Arrow release is that it actually includes an extra film, which is fairly short, just over an hour long. I haven't watched it as of yet, but it's supposedly Kubrick's second ever feature known as Killer's Kiss from 1955. So I'll have to check that out at some point. It was just a neat inclusion to discover on this Blu-ray release. So overall, quite a fun film. I'd recommend checking it out if you're a fan of Kubrick's other work, and certainly something that pleasantly surprised me. So that is The Killing. Next up we have another Blind Buy movie. This is a early 70s French film known as La Planète Sauvage, or Fantastic Planet, or Savage Planet in English translation. And overall I was blown away by the animation throughout this film. Very trippy, psychedelic visuals, with a very morbid and creepy social commentary on oppression. And I found this to be overall quite an exhilarating movie, with a very unique power struggle represented between these humanoid kind of characters known as Alms, which are essentially meant to be human beings, being kept as pets and enslaved by a group of humanoid blue aliens known as Drags, and the main human character known as Terre manages to escape enslavement and begin an Alm uprising, with some really brutal sequences throughout. The animation overall I found to be absolutely stunning. The movie is French audio, English subtitle, but there is an English dub available of this film on this Blu-ray set if you wanted to really appreciate the animations more and obviously not have to read the subtitles. But on my initial watch of the film, I did go for the subtitles, and overall I found this to be very enjoyable. The storyline is certainly simplistic at heart, but the themes evoked throughout, and again, the trippy kind of visuals and brutal sort of fight sequences, such as this one in particular, was absolutely fantastic. And some of the scenes where they actually do take down some of the Drags as a collective, those were very satisfying scenes. Very trippy movie, perhaps not for everyone, but I found it to be very enjoyable, and I would highly recommend checking it out if you're a fan of animated features. Next up we have Ashens and the Polybius Heist, a movie made by a YouTuber known as Ashens or Stuart Ashen. If you're unfamiliar with the channel, definitely one I would highly recommend. A very comedic man who centralizes on kind of randomized videos looking at random bits of merchandise and various bits of technology. And this is actually his second film. The initial film, Ashens and the Quest for the Game Child, I very much enjoyed. And likewise with this movie, which I did intend to feature in my previous update video, but it genuinely slipped my mind, and perhaps so as well, since Ashens, funnily enough, made this available yet again as of late. The Ashens movie store is where you could have purchased this from, and even though he said on the first run, this will be the only run of the movie that you can get, and on the second run, he said the exact same, where he's actually managed to launch some action figures from the film as well, which is kind of bizarre. I doubt very significantly that he will only be running this twice now. I'm sure there'll be another opportunity to pick up this movie in the future if you were looking to do so. If not, obviously, eBay would be your best go, I would have thought, if you were looking to get hold of this, along with Quest for the Game Child as well. And the movie, it was overall quite a fun heist film. Wasn't as good in my honest opinion as Quest for the Game Child, but it did express a lot of unique comedy, often associated with the kind of stuff that Ashens does anyway. And I did like the throwaway references to ongoing gags such as Chef Excellence, which I thought was a nice touch, bringing Dan Tomlinson back into the film. And even though I'm not really a big fan of his channel, Nerd Cubed I thought actually brought a lot to this film as well. Overall, a very funny performance throughout, and genuinely quite a memorable film. It's something that I will be keeping in the collection for a little while. So that is Ashens and the Polybius Heist. And last up for the Blu-rays, we have another edition from the folks at Warner Archive, and that is the complete original series of the Herculoids, a very bizarre late 60s animation from Hanna-Barbera. And these kinds of shows I often use for background noise, just something to have on while editing. And usually they don't take my full sort of attention or interest, but this show has stolen my attention for pretty much the majority of the episodes that I've seen so far. Very strange visuals and certainly some of the most bizarre character designs, with the small family living on a isolated planet, having these monsters as part of like an extended family almost, and the missions that they go through, some really crazy shenanigans throughout. The only downside I would say is that some of the sort of monster characters make some of the most fucking irritating noises, particularly the winged kind of dragon creature.
Let's go, Zuck!
I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but if you love nostalgic kind of cartoons, then I'm sure this would be something that would capture your imagination there. So that is the complete series of the Herculoids. Let's move on to the DVDs. Moving on to the DVDs, first up we have Scum, directed by Alan Clark. This film came out back in 1979 and certainly did not shy away from the very sinister themes featured throughout, particularly the unjust treatment of prisoners, which was overall a very disturbing theme, very heavily featured throughout, which involved a lot of character development, mainly for the main character of Carling, played by Ray Winston. And I really enjoyed what that led to, with there being themes of racial discrimination purposefully evoked throughout, along with a very uncomfortable rape scene, which was certainly not for the faint-hearted, which then led on to a very unsettling suicide scene towards the end. And with those themes, this film was actually regarded throughout the 1980s as a video nasty here in the UK, with this sparking quite a lot of controversy, but the surreal elements of this film really do build a picture on each character. I loved the character of Archer in particular, an individual practicing individuality by being a vegetarian and purposefully refusing to do certain things in line with his own thought process. I thought he was certainly a standout character and really did overall keep me hooked throughout, wanting to know what would happen to a character like him throughout, and the ending really did not disappoint. And I would highly recommend checking out this film. Very interesting watch to say the least, and overall a very short film which you can surprisingly find on YouTube in its uncensored glory, so definitely check that out while you can. Next up we have Demolition Man, starring Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. Overall, I found this to be quite the cheesy science fiction thrill ride. It was certainly entertaining for what it was, and it was very quotable as well, which I found to be quite amusing. Where the film initially set in the 90s, where the character of Sergeant John Spartan, played by Stallone, is sadly responsible for a hostage situation controlled by Wesley Snipes' character of Simon Phoenix going horribly wrong. And so both parties are blamed for the untimely deaths of several innocents, and so they are both imprisoned, only with how bizarre this film is for a sci-fi film, they are both instead cryogenically frozen. And so, both waking up coincidentally together several decades into the future, we have a police officer that is very out of touch with the modernized methods, along with a criminal who is far gone from the expectations of criminals in this new future, where criminals are now very rare, very few and far between, very weak, and he is a complete psychopath, and I absolutely love the tendencies that that character had. And the overall character design as well, a very bizarre look, and something that certainly stands out, and I love the way Snipes portrays the character of Phoenix throughout. And so with them both now loose on this new future, we have essentially a game of cat and mouse where Stallone's character has to try and adapt his archaic methods of policing in order to hopefully capture Snipes' character. Overall, quite the exciting thrill ride. I loved the ending, very satisfying to say the least. I don't think I'll be revisiting this film anytime soon, but I would certainly recommend it and give it the one watch. So that is Demolition Man. Next up we have Persepolis, which is an animated French film from the late 2000s. which is based on a series of graphic novels by Majane Satrapi, who is the protagonist of this story, and this is essentially her life story, documented and captured, where it represents her life growing up throughout the 1970s, throughout pre-revolutionary Iran, as her life then spirals out of control thanks to the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s. And despite those dark undertones, this film is essentially a coming-of-age story. It's quite a powerful drama and something that I didn't expect to be as funny as it was. The way the story is told is incredibly entertaining, and for an animated feature, the vast majority of this film is in black and white, but it's very easy on the eyes. The style is very simplistic but very charming at that. And I love the very brief moments that are actually in full colour, where Majane is essentially reflecting on the past and very important moments throughout her life, where she then tells those stories which then evolve into the black and white animation. And this film was very fun for challenging gender stereotypes and especially very strict religious moments as well, where she challenges what it would mean to literally just remove her veil in public. I thought moments like that were quite funny for what they represented, since she was just challenging authority on purpose. Overall, quite the thrill ride, something I would highly recommend. Next up is Dead Poets Society, which is a film starring Robin Williams that I had been meaning to watch for many years, and I'm so glad I checked this film out. I wish I'd watched it much sooner, but I feel I've appreciated this a lot more in later years, and for sure, this wasn't what I was expecting. Robin Williams portrays a phenomenal character of John Keating, who is a lecturer and a very charismatic and overall very inspirational figure at that, who inspires a class of boys who are very disinterested in the idea of learning about poetry, and then through his very unorthodox methods of teaching, he manages to inspire them to seize the day, as he often repeated, and basically taught them more about life than really about poetry, which then all superseded together, which I thought was absolutely phenomenal. Really great character. I really wish Robin Williams had portrayed more dramatic style roles, but this was easily one of his best characters, and a film that I'll for sure be revisiting in the near future, and one that I would strongly recommend checking out. So that is Dead Poets Society. Next up, we have the complete series of the Paul Abbott drama No Offense, which aired on Channel 4 a few years ago. This is a show that I watched the entire first series of, funnily enough, thanks to a media class I was attending. And I actually wrote about this for one of my final exams, and I absolutely enjoyed the first series. A very dark and twisted police procedural drama, with the initial series being led by the character of D.I. Deering, investigating a serial killer who was purposefully going after Down syndrome girls. Very twisted way to start a show, but I was very intrigued to continue the series, mainly because of Paul Ritter starring as the forensic scientist known as Miller, and his character certainly has quite a lot of development throughout over the course of the second and the third series, and he was really the main hook for me to continue to watch the show. But I really enjoyed the second series investigating a crime family known as the Atters, which had quite the twisted ending, and then series 3 went all out for right-wing terrorism, which I thought was definitely a very strong theme to kind of conclude the series on. Supposedly there were plans for a fourth series, but sadly that just never came to fruition, with this being cancelled. But I'd like to think that one day this could perhaps be brought back. The character of D.I. Deering, one of the more intriguing main protagonists for a show I have seen from something like this in a very long time. Next up, we have the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, A Very Sunny Christmas special, which is basically just an extended episode of It's Always Sunny. I kind of slowed down on watching the show. I got up to series 6, and I was about to pull the trigger on series 7, but then I noticed that there was this Christmas special set in between, and rationally I thought this would be included on the series 7 DVD. Unfortunately not, so I had to go out of my way and pick this up as a separate release, unfortunately. Haven't seen this as of yet. I've heard very good things about it. I'm tempted to kind of save this actually for the holiday season, since we're not too far off, I guess, anyway. Next up we have Flashdance, which is yet another example of a film that I have had in the collection for quite a while and just never bothered watching. I initially picked this up, I believe, as part of a university project, funnily enough, where we were given a list of films to choose from and work on a presentation about, and I think in the end I opted for a different film. But I picked this up dirt cheap quite a while ago, and I thought it'd just be worth sticking this on and giving it a watch. And it was fairly short. I enjoyed it for what it was. It wasn't overly interesting. The character of Alex, played by Jennifer Beals, was quite an inspirational figure, suppressing her hidden talent as a dancer, and then finally letting loose and embracing what she had as a talent. Definitely an intriguing character to say the least for that angle, but beyond that, I thought this film was just okay, nothing too spectacular. It was good to see the iconic Maniac dance in its fullest. I thought that was quite good. But yeah, perhaps not a film for everyone, probably not one I'll be keeping hold of anyway. But that is Flashdance. Next up we have the sequel to 1981's Heavy Metal, that being Heavy Metal Fuck 2, aka Heavy Metal 2000, which was a very long-awaited sequel supposedly to the original film, and a film that I was outright trying to avoid. I really did enjoy the initial movie, and I didn't want a sequel that had very mixed reviews, mostly negative, to taint my experience of the original. Thankfully, to be honest, this may as well be a film in its own right, of its own entity. It's more inspired by the events of Heavy Metal than actually being a straight follow-up to that film. And overall, for what it was worth, I thought it was just okay to fairly mediocre. There were some moments I thought were great. It certainly does take a lot of the inspiration from the original film of there being very gory, violent moments, along with the protagonist basically just being a big-titted woman. Not really much going on beyond that for her character, unfortunately, beyond this very bizarre revenge plot, trying to stop the main antagonist from achieving eternal life. And overall I thought the animation was fairly simplistic to an extent, wasn't as fluent as what we had in the original film, but some very creative visuals for sure. The one thing that really took me out of the movie was the strange big reveal at the end, where one of the characters that has been throughout the film all along is twisted to be revealed as the big bad that they speak about throughout the film, which is just a really strangely rendered 3D CGI character. Really threw me out of the film. I didn't quite understand what they were trying to achieve with that sudden change in animation. But otherwise, the film in itself was good for the soundtrack, which I thought was okay. Some memorable characters are featured throughout, but this isn't a film I'll be rewatching anytime soon. So that is Heavy Metal Fuck 2. Moving on, we have the Blade Trilogy box set, which I've only seen the first Blade movie so far. I've been intrigued to check out the sequels, but just never bothered doing so I thought I'd pick up the box set, and it was great to revisit the first film. I really enjoy Wesley Snipes as an actor, and I love his portrayal of the immortal vampire hunter throughout the first film. Definitely an enjoyable experience with quite a twisted ending as well that certainly did intrigue me to go ahead and check out the other films, which I've heard mixed things about. I've heard very good things about the second. Blade Trinity apparently isn't all that good, sadly. But nonetheless, I'm certainly intrigued to check out the direction of where these films continue. So that is the Blade movies. Next up, we have a couple of Disney classic movies. We have Pinocchio, which is the second ever Disney classic feature film. And this film, I forgot how twisted it was. I had this on VHS when I was a lot younger, and I guess it just didn't hit home just how morbid some of the sequences were throughout this film. Still very enjoyable. I absolutely love the character of Jiminy Cricket. Definitely one of the standouts for me personally. And then of course Pinocchio being a wooden doll or puppet, then wishing to be a real boy, which then suddenly comes true, only with some disastrous consequences across the feature film itself. Definitely a winning formula for Disney, and certainly a film that I've been wanting to revisit for a while, and I'm very glad that I did. So that is Pinocchio, and we also have, which I haven't watched as of yet sadly, The Black Cauldron, which was recommended to me by a close friend. Supposedly one of the darker Disney classic films. I don't know whether or not that is true, but I'm intrigued to check this out. Filling in a couple of gaps in the collection, we have Series 4 and Series 8 of Friends, which in one of my previous update videos I showed off all the other box sets of the show, and these were the ones that I needed to fill in the gaps. And I really enjoyed Series 4 in particular, the ending with the drama leading up to Ross's wedding with the British character of Emily. I certainly didn't expect things to go the way that they did, and I'm going to assume there's a lot of foreshadowing in those kinds of segments, particularly with Ross and Rachel. And I haven't started it as of yet, but I am actually currently on Series 8, and I'm looking forward to checking this out and seeing where the story goes from here on out. So that is Series 4 and Series 8 of Friends. From one of my recent unboxing videos, we have the complete series of Dexters Laboratory, which is a show that I am very glad I revisited. This series is absolutely fantastic. Very imaginative science fiction cartoons revolving around the character of Dexter, of course. And I absolutely love revisiting old shows, and this was one that I'm very glad I did pick up in the end. This box set is a Region 4 import from Australia and is supposedly quite difficult to get hold of now. So if you're a fan of the show, I would highly recommend grabbing this sooner rather than later. And if you wish to see a proper unboxing of this DVD set, you can check out the video on my channel. And to round off this update video, we have another DVD set to fill in a gap in the collection, and that is the Ren and Stimpy Show Season 5 and some more of 4. This is a Region 1 DVD set which, funnily enough, I have actually had before, but the original copy I received was completely damaged, unfortunately, so I returned it a very long time ago, and only recently did I actually repurchase this, and I'm glad that I did. I absolutely love the Ren and Stimpy Show, very strange Nickelodeon cartoon from the 90s. If you haven't seen it before, one I would certainly recommend checking out. I don't think this show really is for everyone, but there are so many strange, wonderful, and memorable episodes, and I really wanted to complete my collection. So that is the final DVD set for the Ren and Stimpy Show. So that's going to do it for my Blu-ray and DVD update for September 2021. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, be sure to leave me a like down below. Let me know in the comments, have you checked out any of the titles that I've featured in this video? Are there any that you would perhaps recommend for a future update video? And for more content, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel at DVD Review Studios.
Are you threatening me?